Today we're going to go over all the references, all the mistakes, and everything that comes up about the Orixás in the second season of The Legend of Lara Croft, Netflix's Tomb Raider. Well, it basically starts with Lara having to save her friend, whose name I actually forgot, but she's not that important anyway, except for the first episode and a little bit of the second. Lara manages to save her with the help of a woman who looks like a total mobster. They save Lara's friend and then they go to a restaurant.
My friend and I would like a bottle of your best champagne, please. 2 dozen oysters, the fish crudo, and the dry-aged steak with mushrooms.
And there, the woman who looks like a mobster says she works for a very rich woman who wants to meet both of them, Lara and her friend. Well, the two of them go there, and we have this scene in the elevator.
Pitos is a good band name.
It means box in ancient Greek. Like Pandora's.
It has nothing to do with Orixá, but let me just correct Lara here. Pitos doesn't actually mean box in ancient Greek, but rather jar, which caused some confusion, so people nowadays think Pandora had a box and not a jar. Well, then the woman starts saying some nonsense to Lara, telling her that she should practice ethical archaeology, which would basically mean returning archaeological items to the people they belong to, especially the famous Orixá masks, which are the items Lara is after throughout the entire season.
And then it briefly reappeared in Colombia in the diary of a Spanish missionary who believed it was the face of the devil.
Those masks give the powers of the Orixás to whoever is wearing them. Of course, the series takes some creative liberties and so on, but the Orixá masks don't actually exist. Of course, it's actually pretty common in spirit possession rituals and all that, for the Orixás to have their bodies covered, even in the images that represent them. But instead of using masks, they actually use what are called corons, which are kind of like strands that hang down from their crowns and cover their faces. That's mostly out of respect for the Orixás. It's like people wouldn't be worthy of looking at their faces. There's even the Egungun ritual, where it's common for people to wear masks, but the Egunguns are more like ancestral spirits and not Orixás. Masks themselves are more common in Central Africa, which has very little to do with the Orixás. So Lara goes to the museum and ends up telling us a bit about Oko.
This African mask is a representation of Oko, a Yoruba Orixá. According to tradition, his voice was like gravel and his mouth spat out earth when he spoke.
And that's right, Oko is an Orixá of agriculture and the earth, and there are actually stories that when he speaks, earth comes out of his mouth. Because here, since he's the Orixá of the earth, it's like the earth itself is speaking. This caused some problems, because since Oko didn't want to get himself or the people around him dirty, he kind of ended up isolating himself from the other Orixás, and he preferred to stay alone, just with the earth. Well, so Lara ends up taking that mask. Well, not just taking it. Actually, she steals it from the museum and brings it to the woman who was rich. And this woman kind of, in quotes, takes the mask back to the people it belongs to. But in reality, she went there to use the mask and kill Oko himself and take his essence, since she claims she wants to save the world with the Orixá's power. It may seem odd to see Oko die, since he'd be an Orixá, a god of the earth. But in the mythology itself, the Orixás actually end up dying in some stories. It's just that, in this case, they die. That is, their human essence dies, but they continue to live in the spiritual world. Spiritually, you can't destroy what they represent. For example, if you kill Oko, his essence, the earth, still exists. And that woman there using Oko's mask reminded me much more of Aku's Hawaiian mask from Crash Bandicoot than an actual Orixá mask. Just a reminder for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, like and share as well, and consider becoming a channel member. It's less than 5 rays and you get early access to videos. And you'll get exclusive videos as well, besides supporting me here so I can keep working on YouTube. Another way you can help me is by clicking and checking out the products that are showing up on the screen right now. I'll try to offer the book on Orixás and also the PlayStation 5 at a good price, but I don't know how long it will last, so take a look. There will also be a link in the pinned comment. Well, the second episode starts with Lara realizing the mess she made, so the mafia woman there says they're going to Bahia. After all, you can't talk about Orixás without going to Brazil, right? As Lara herself says, Orixás are still worshipped here in Brazil. In fact, that's something Lara repeats a lot in this episode.
African Orixás are still worshipped in Brazil.
I think it makes sense. During colonial times, 70% of immigrants were from West Africa.
And yes, when the slaves were left here in Brazil, their beliefs kind of mixed with the local culture, like that of the indigenous people and Christianity, and a new religion emerged from that. But it wasn't just this one that was born, and not only in Brazil, because depending on where the slaves were left, other religions were born, like for example Santeria and Voodoo itself.
Você pode nos levar até a Igreja de Todos os Santos?
When Lara mentioned this thing about the Church of All Saints, I started looking for which church she was referring to. I went there, did some research, racked my brain, did some more research. The first church in Brazil, because according to Lara, this Church of All Saints would be the oldest in Brazil, but none of them fit. Until Lara went inside the church and saw this image of Our Lady of Mercy and mentioned Amerigo Vespucci.
Our Lady of Mercy protecting the Vespucci family.
This church that Lara is talking about is actually an Italian church, which is indeed called All Saints there. And there's an image of Our Lady, which they say does have Amerigo Vespucci beneath her, being protected by her. Actually, the All Saints church she is referring to comes from a phrase by Amerigo Vespucci, who called Bahia the Bay of All Saints, because there were several churches around the area. Or around the area, I never really know exactly how to say that expression.
The gods and demigods of the Yoruba.
They worship them alongside the saints that are in the church.
And yes, the Orixás were worshipped alongside the saints. Actually, it's not that they were worshipped next to the saints, but rather they were worshipped as if they were the saints. This allowed the slaves to keep their beliefs without persecution from their master.
It looks like the Orixá who is in charge. A goddess of the sea.
One thing that happens is that although Yemanja became very famous here in Brazil as the Orixá of the seas, if we stop to think that the Orixás in this series are actually the Orixás from Africa itself, over there in Africa, Yemanja was not exactly an Orixá of the seas. She was actually an Orixá of the river. The one who held the position over the seas was Olokun. The Orixá in charge wasn't exactly Yemanja, right? But I think that position was more for Oxalá, Oxalufa, or even Zango. And we find out that Yemanja in this case would be Havan's wife there. So this Yemanja is really cool, although I don't think she would get old, because she's an Orixá, right? But later on we'll see her true form. And then we have Lara and her friend taking part in the Yemanja festival that happens on February 2nd all over Brazil. Well, at the end of the episode, Lara ends up fighting the mobster for Yemanja's mask, but she ends up giving up the fight because a child's life was at stake. Then Yemanja reveals that actually the mask Lara was protecting was fake. The real one was with Yemanja herself. And after taking something there, Lara ends up having a vision of Exu's symbol. And Exu also appears right at the end of the episode, walking through a cemetery. And the third episode takes place in New Orleans and starts in a little voodoo shop in the area. Well, when Lara goes inside, the guy starts saying a bunch of nonsense that has nothing to do with voodoo, right? And even Lara's friend, Senha, ends up explaining the truth about voodoo. What is it?
Voodoo isn't dangerous. It's a belief in which spirits are connected.
Actually, I even have a video about voodoo here on the channel from a few days ago. If you want to watch it, it'll be in the card and in the description. Anyway, we end up seeing an image of Papa Legba, who is basically Exu, but from voodoo. They have very similar traits.
The enslaved people call this being Exu. He is the god of evil.
And Exu is indeed very powerful and even a herald of death, but he's not evil, no. And he really is a trickster spirit. I would even say he's worse than Loki, because he even kind of knocks out Oxalá in a story, preventing Oxalá from creating the world. After that, Lara realizes there's a guy following them, a guy who wore red, had a trident symbol on his chest, and loves to drink. So you already know who he is, right?
So why haven't you caught him yet?
I'm the intermediary, tough girl.
And he even calls himself the middleman. But what is he really? Because Exu, according to what they say, would be the messenger of the gods. They also say that in offerings, if you want to honor an Orixá and give something to him, first you have to offer it to Exu, who is the messenger, and then to the corresponding Orixá. Otherwise, Exu won't bring anything to that Orixá.
It was the ship that bore the name of the great Obabanjoko, the very one.
There is actually a legend about Obabanjoko. It's not exactly about the ship itself, although you know, there is a ship in the story. According to what they say, Obabanjoko means the one who sits, the king who sits. It's closely related to Zango. It's the city of Oyo, which would be the city of Zango. And according to what they say, during the era of slavery, people from that city were taken. Among them, there was a priest who represented Zango. During the journey, even while imprisoned, Obabanjoko ended up invoking the powers of Zango, and a lightning bolt struck the ship. That ship sank.
Have you ever heard of Castor and Pollux, Romulus and Remus, St. Cosmos and St. Damien? I think these twins present in legends are actually Taiwo and Kehinde.
That scene is interesting because that guy does a sort of comparative mythology in the middle of the episode. He talks about several twins throughout history, Castor and Pollux from Greece, Romulus and Remus from Rome, and even St. Cosmos and St. Damien, who underwent syncretism with the Ibeges. The Ibeges, or Ibege, are twin deities from Yoruba mythology who represent duality, joy, innocence, and the beginning of everything. And they are the only Orixás who are always represented as children, who have a very special power within the African pantheon. The word Ibeges comes from the combination of Ibi, which means birth, and Egi, which means two. In the tradition, it is even believed that twins share a single soul divided into two bodies. And because of this, if a twin dies in childhood, a wooden sculpture called Air is made so that the soul remains complete. At the episode's end, Exu reveals himself to us in a really cool way.
I am Exu, the Herald of Death. Exu.
Well, Lara ends up with one of the Ibege masks, and the stylish-haired Russian girl gets the other one. With that, knowing that the rich woman would end up trying to kill one of the Ibeges because of the mask, Lara, Sin, and Exu go after the other Ibege, who is Taiwo, to see if she can help them. And while looking for her, they go to a bar where there's a scene that I swear to God I thought Lara was going to get slapped on the butt.
Even when we want to stay hidden. Let's get out of the rain.
For the love of, there's that quote from Exu talking about Olorum, right? Who, in this case, would be the supreme god in Yoruba mythology. And depending on the person's perspective in the tradition, Olorum is the same god as the one in the Bible. I thought it was really cool that they made Ibege as two women, but they probably did that because, in this case, if they had put two children there, one of them would have to die, and that would be kind of heavy.
Our Father, in his infinite wisdom, gave me the power of healing.
And yes, Ibege in this case would have the power of healing. Besides, they're kind of syncretized with St. Cosmos and St. Damien, who were also healers. But Ibege's healing went far beyond that. Unlike entities that worked with specific herbs for physical illnesses or things like that, Ibege heals through restoring emotional balance. They believe that the energy of the child drives away Ogun, which has very heavy energies, and where there was joy and purity, illness had difficulty taking hold.
Some superstitions say that she is in the north, and that they saw a mad queen.
Well, in that scene, Taiwo ends up saying that Kehinde went crazy, and there's a myth that this happens too. Depending on the story and the version, the one who goes crazy changes. But anyway, the essence of the story is the same. According to what they say, there was a time when Taiwo ended up dying, and the other twin, who in this case was Kehinde, became extremely sad and didn't want to do anything anymore. So to fix this, they ended up creating the Eri, which would be a wooden figure, to represent Kehinde's brother who had passed away. And with that, Kehinde started to take care of this statue as if it were his own brother Taiwo, feeding it, bathing it, talking to it. And by projecting his love and care onto the image, Kehinde ended up regaining his mental balance.
Are you talking about Elifer's story? In the beginning, people were created equally. It was a utopia, but then they wanted to feel special, and so they asked for more.
And this story actually exists. According to what they say, Elifer was a very well-balanced city. No one went hungry. It was even close to the sky. But the people there started asking for too much, eating too much, and they even stole and wasted things, throwing away what they didn't want. Because of that, the sky started to move away from Elifer, and imbalance began. Hunger and all the other bad things in the world that we know started to exist. And that image there, I found it kind of strange, right? Kehinde surrounded by cats there. What do you think they meant by that? Did they mean that the Norse gods were actually Orixás too? Because as far as I remember, Ibege has no connection with cats, right? Could they be saying that Kehinde, in this case, would be the goddess Freya, who has a lot of connections with cats? Anyway, the rich woman ends up finding Kehinde there and kills her and takes her power. After that, we see a Viking funeral for Kehinde. In episode 5, there isn't that much going on. Basically, Lara and her group go to a party that Camilla is throwing. In this case, Camilla is the rich woman's name. I just remembered it. But Lara's group goes to this party to try to get the masks back. A really cool scene that happens is that Senha can't seduce a guy there to scan his eye, but Ishu manages to do it.
A fun fact, Isaac, when he was young, was bullied. He says this inspired him to become the smartest man.
And after that, we see several mythological items there in Camilla's collection. For example, Thor's belt. But Ishu ends up saying that actually it's Corey's belt. In this case, Corey, at least I think so, right, would be the Orixá connected to fertility, children, and also protection. And there's also the Spear of Destiny, which in this case is the spear that the Roman soldier used to poke Jesus on the cross.
Ogun has always looked out for the heroes, Lara. He believed that humans could transform and improve the world.
So Ishu says here that Ogun was the Orixá who trusted humans the most, who was the most present. And in fact, Ogun was actually quite present in human lives because in this case, he was an Orixá of the Forge. He was also a hunter Orixá and a warrior as well, but mainly of the Forge. He was the one who gave iron to humans, the tools, and also the weapons. But I'm not exactly sure if he was the one who trusted humans the most. Ogun was one of the most powerful Orixás in Yoruba mythology. I mean, not was, right? He is a very powerful Orixá. He's always competing with Sango for the position of leader of the Orixás. That episode ends with Lara going to Cuba, while Camila regenerates after the explosion that happened there. In episode 6, the group goes to Cuba to meet Omulu. In this case, Omulu would be the Orixá of diseases, plagues, and also healing. But he also has a very strong connection with Mor.
If she really wants to restart this planet, she's going to need Obalu.
In this case, Exu ends up calling him Obalu. Not just him, but Lara also calls him Obalu here. That's one of his names. Also Sapana and Sapata. And this Omulu looks really good, but his real form is going to make a lot of sense soon. In fact, it's referenced by Exu himself in this line here.
And where are your boils? A garden with flowers? Seriously? A garden? In this case,
Omulu is always represented with his body covered in sores or boils. There are several versions of how he got these sores. Some say he ended up being kind of excluded by the village he was part of. That's even why Exu says in this episode that Obalu hates people. Because he was excluded, he ended up going into the forest, got bitten by a lot of mosquitoes, and got those wounds. But another story says he ended up disrespecting his mother Nanã because he kept stepping on certain flowers. In response to that, Nanã ended up putting some marks on him, marks on his skin that look like flowers, the sores.
But my mask is with my mother.
Ouch.
That's great. What does that mean? That he threw his mask into the ocean.
And in this case, Obalu ends up saying that his mask is with his mother. His mother in this case would be the waters, right? The ocean or the sea, referring to Yemanja. But in this case, Yemanja would be Obalu's adoptive mother. His real mother would be Nanã. But because of the marks on his skin, Nanã ended up leaving him near the sea, and he was adopted by Yemanja. In this scene, we have references to some voodoo gods, in this case, Mau and Lissa, the twin gods of the sun and the moon. In the case of Fawn mythology, they are actually united gods, stuck together. They never separate. And they are children of Nanã Baruku, who is the supreme goddess of Fawn mythology. And we have Obalu's real form there, which is extremely cool. I thought it was really awesome. And those straw coverings have a story behind them, okay? According to the stories, once the Orixás threw a party and didn't invite Omulu, he ended up feeling kind of embarrassed to go inside and stayed outside, peeking through the window. But Yansa noticed and felt sorry for him. So she made a straw outfit for him to cover all his wounds so he could come in and dance with her. But anyway, unfortunately, Omulu ends up being defeated and killed by Camilla and Asia. In episode 7, we have few references, but some really cool ones. The episode starts with Obalu's funeral, and then Lara, Exu, and Sin go looking for Exu's lost city to get his mask, to see what he can do for him there. Yoruba mythology doesn't exactly mention a lost city, but that reminded me of the mythical Ife, right? the mythical city of the Yoruba, which would be where the Orixás live. In fact, they say that's where Oxalá came down from to create the earth. Well, then we find out that Exu was the king of one of the cities. And Exu, in Yoruba mythology, has several stories about how he becomes king. In one of them, he kind of ends up entering the house of a local village chief to sleep there, saying he needed a place to rest. But during the night, he sneakily left the place, saying he was going to take a leak and set fire right on top of the house where he was staying. He started shouting, saying that someone had set his house on fire, and that he would lose his money, all his fortune that was inside. And everyone who came to see what was happening, he told them the same story, until the local chief ended up waking up, and he got desperate, saying he would find a way to pay Exu. But Exu kept increasing his fortune, until the local chief had to offer his own village to Exu, and he ended up becoming king. In fact, interestingly, most of the Orixás were local kings, who ended up being deified, according to their stories. They died as humans and ended up becoming Orixás afterward, but Exu is the only one among them for whom this doesn't happen. They were already Orixás before becoming kings, and we have this story of Exu kind of running away from the battle, right? Abandoning his city. And yes, we do have a story from Yoruba mythology where Exu does flee at one point, but it's quite different. Actually, Exu would have thrown a banquet in his kingdom. But since he is a trickster and chaotic Orixá, he kind of ended up causing a fight on purpose among his guests. In the end, the guests realized that the king, instead of bringing them peace, brought chaos. So they kind of expelled him, and Exu kind of ended up running away, leaving his marks behind, and we have Lara with her classic glasses from the PS1 games, and then she gives the mask to Exu. Well, the last episode starts with a really cool scene of Exu opening his domain, creating his portals there.
They tried to kill my father once, the other Orixás. I'm the only one capable of stealing the powers of the other Orixás.
Yes, Exu is extremely powerful, and the other Orixás do depend on him. He is the messenger. He is the bridge between heaven and earth. Without him, there is neither worship nor offerings. According to what they say, if you are going to make an offering to an Orixá, I don't know, for example, to Ogun, first you must make an offering to Exu so that he is pleased and takes your message to Ogun. Mythology includes stories that explain why Exu has the right to eat offerings first, right? According to what they say, once Exu got so hungry that he started devouring not only the food but the world, Jel. He started drinking up the waters of the world, began to eat the trees, the mountains, and only stopped when they promised that Exu would always eat first before all the Orixás. So in fact, Exu is really fierce. He even ended up earning the title of Dean of the Orixás, the oldest of the Orixás, given by Olodumare himself. And now, I don't exactly remember a story where the Orixás try to kill Olodumare, right? But if anyone remembers, you can leave it in the comments. But I remember there's one where the Orixás are kind of competing to see who is the most important. And Exu, taking advantage of that, did some things so that the Orixás would depend on him, thus becoming the messenger for everyone and making them depend on him to connect with Earth. I think Exu's portal's really cool. Well, after that, everyone there ends up getting ready for the final battle against Mila. They will have help from Lara herself, Sin, Yemenja, and Taiwo. And then we get to see the real design of Yemenja, which is really cool too. Well, then the fight breaks out. There are waves going back and forth, planes crashing, portals everywhere, until Mila creates a giant energy sphere surrounded by diseases and plants. And then Exu in his chicken form, which I thought was amazing. He invades Mila's sphere in a really cool scene and rips off her first mask and uses it against Mila herself. After that, he does a combo with Yemanja, teleports her behind Mila, and Yemanja delivers a fatal blow to her. And then we have this awesome scene of Exu putting an end to the rich lady. And it doesn't end there because we have a final scene of Exu apparently going to Olodumare and giving him the masks of the Orixás who died. And then maybe hinting that they will be reborn. And then there's also a scene that might be hinting at a possible third season of the series. I'll tell you guys that I really like this season. I didn't like the first one. It was pretty bad. But this one focused on the Orixás was really fun to watch. I did miss seeing some other Orixás though. For example, I wanted to see Shango or Oshun. But for what the series aimed to do, it was cool, and the Orixás were well represented. Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share and hype it up too. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.